The button has been pressed. Hello, happy people. I asked myself, what is it that I really love? The answer came, you would think it's obvious, but it still took me some time to figure out. I really love reading. So, since I love reading and I read a lot of books all the time, I decided why not to start a vlog which is dedicated to that. When it comes to autobiographies, I'm not exactly sure where I stand on them. On one hand, it's obviously very special that the person is narrating their life. It's like a first-hand experience. But on the other hand, I don't find a lot of them that interesting. There are a few books that I was like, wow, this is crazy, this is really amazing. But often I would say I even prefer fiction to autobiographies or any sort of biographies. But this time I decided to make an exception, and my first book will be, it's laying here. It's the book by Trevor Noah and it's called Born a Crime. Why did I pick this book? Well, last year, just before the whole pandemic craziness started in February, I actually got a chance to travel to South Africa. And this book was literally on every bookshelf wherever I went in South Africa.
You agree that the meaning of life is to visit penguins, which I just did, right guys? I think they're not listening, they're asleep, which is very disrespectful, by the way. We came all this way to visit you guys and you two are just like looking very cute and you think that's your excuse. I don't take it. I might have to come and visit you again, just so next time you're awake and you're better listeners.
I also went to Apartheid Museum in Johannesburg, and it was such a special experience.
So apparently we'll do bungee jumping from here. I would never do it. I would be too scared.
I heard of Trevor Noah before. I know that he's a host of The Daily Show, a super popular TV program in the US, but I was never really a huge fan. I would see bits and pieces here and there, but I was never really familiar with the program. I know that it's like politics combined with comedy. He seems like a very intelligent, very interesting guy. I had no idea he's even from South Africa. So when I saw his face all over South Africa, I was like, okay, that's interesting. So how does the guy from South Africa makes it to the US? Spoiler alert! You don't get the answer to that. That's one of the things that I kind of expected from the book, for Trevor to tell us how did he make it. He does say that he started his career, he became quite a famous comedian, he started touring in Africa. The book is rather short, it only has 280 something pages. It was published in 2016, it's super easy to read. It's like a very informal style where a person just narrates his life. What I really liked is that he goes back to his childhood, he really tells us the stories. Some are really embarrassing. I'm not going to spoil them to you, but super fun to read. For example, one thing that I learned is that people in South Africa don't like to have cats as pets. It's a very common thing to have a dog, but once Trevor's mother got a cat, actually, they got two black cats. People didn't understand it. They called her a witch. They said that it's witches' cats, and eventually they had to get two dogs. And I'm a big animal fan, so for me, the storytelling around animals is always a win. So I have really enjoyed that part.
Yes. Good birdie.
One of the reviews to this book calls the book the love letter to Trevor Noah's mother. And this is actually very true. That's a part that I didn't expect. I found this memoir to be very personal. Trevor says some very likable things about his mom, as well as not so likable. And I listened to the podcast where Trevor discusses his book with Oprah Winfrey. It's called Super Soul Podcast, and there he shares that This was not the original trajectory where he wanted the book to go when he started writing it. It was just an attempt to narrate his life. But as he started writing it, somehow his mother is such an extraordinary person that she just started to come up in the book very often. Trevor's mother is black. Trevor's father is from Switzerland. He's white. So Trevor was already born as a crime, because legally in South Africa it wasn't allowed to have a baby with a white person. And his mother, the rebel that she is, she decides, I don't care, I'm gonna have this baby, I'm gonna love this baby, I'm gonna have someone that belongs to me. What this book captures so well, in my opinion, is kind of a personal search for who you are. The book about becoming, being a teenager, going through things. I really enjoyed some of the love stories that Trevor talks about. He seems like a very successful guy now, but back in the day he wasn't so successful among the girls. And I think there are 3 chapters in the book. They're called super funny. They're called, I'm gonna read it, something like a young man, long, awkward, occasionally tragic and frequently humiliating education in affairs of the heart, part 1, Valentine's Day. And all 3 stories are honestly so great. A very interesting fact that I found about Trevor Noah, which I didn't know, is that he is a polyglot, which means he speaks numerous languages. And just to be correct on this, I will tell you that he speaks English, Afrikaans, Zulu, Xhosa, Tswana, Tsonga, and some German. So that already makes it 7 languages, which is impressive. I'm someone who speaks 2.5, nearly 3 languages. For me, this is something definitely to admire. What a game changer it is to be able to speak different languages. There was a story where he talked about being robbed. He was walking on the street and he hears guys behind him speaking in one of the languages that he actually understands, and they're talking about robbing him. So he turns around and I think he said something like, okay guys, why don't we rob someone together? And of course they suddenly became shy and they said, no brother, you're one of us, don't worry. And that's how he got away. Sometimes all it takes is only to speak hello, goodbye, thank you in a certain person's language for them to really feel, maybe not that you're one of their own, but to somehow be able to relate to each other. This way you're able to show the respect to their culture, you know where they come from. Maybe you don't entirely know, but you show some level of respect, you show some level of understanding, which is obviously, I think, for all of us, when we meet people like that, it's super likable. What I found very special is obviously his bond with his mother, their relationship, because they were always the team, no matter how much they were fighting, no matter how much there was misunderstanding. And on top of that, his mother is a deeply religious woman, so it really made me laugh how he describes whenever they were fighting, she would always say, God knows, God decides. As a kid who was told how to think, he would try to challenge his mom. So he would try to say, but so why did God allow our car to break? You know, stuff like that. So I found this humorous angle. Obviously, I'm reading a book by a comedian, I knew that. But you know, there was some subtle humor here and there, which makes the book such a nice, pleasurable read. More than anything, it talks about a personal story, but it also goes back to the history parts. As a white and privileged person, I don't think I can ever understand the reality of being black. I can only speak from a white person's perspective, but what I found interesting is that Trevor Noah was in between 2 worlds. On one hand, he really belonged to the world of black people, his whole family was black, but obviously he was also white. He talks about being treated differently. So for example, other black kids would get punished and he wouldn't because he's colored. But obviously the whole thing just made him feel like he's a stranger, he doesn't really belong anywhere. And there were moments which he describes in the book where he had to actually pick which kids to hang out with. He got a scholarship. He was in a class full of white kids, but there was a class B where the black kids were, and he actually asked the teacher, can I move to the class B? And the teacher was like, no, you shouldn't do that. It's honestly impressive how a guy who is only 36 about to turn 37 years old, has reached such international success. And when you listen to him talking, you see a very charismatic person, very eloquent, very composed. And I think that's what speaks to people. And what I didn't expect so much in his book is that how honest it would be. Some scenes make you laugh, some make you a little embarrassed. I'm not going to reveal all the secrets. But in general, the book feels very human, and it talks about the most fundamental things, like it talks about the family, it talks about being raised in poverty. Because before I read this book, I still thought, okay, this guy still must come from a certain privileged background. I really don't believe that he comes from a very, very poor area. But like he talks, he was raised in Soweto. It's true that his mom applied for a certain bursary. He got into a more privileged school with time. But in the end of the day, there were moments where they ate caterpillars for dinner. So that obviously shows you that, yes, he was not from a very rich background. And in fact, it's a self-made guy who really reached a lot of success. So kudos to him for that. Every chapter in this book starts with a little context where Trevor would talk a little about South African history or give some background, and then he would dive into the personal stories. And I quite liked it because it felt like a very good mix for me. What also made me laugh in this book was him describing how South African people pick the names for their kids. Often those names can be super random. So in this book there is a character and Trevor's friend who's called Hitler. And obviously everyone is shocked, and whenever they go dancing together, Hitler starts performing and everyone starts yelling, "Go Hitler, go Hitler." And that puts a lot of people in shock, especially people like foreigners who know. And then as a pinnacle of the whole thing, they go to give concert to Jewish people and they start yelling "Go Hitler," and then you can imagine that the whole thing goes wrong. But like Trevor Noah explains, what's actually really funny is that people in South Africa, they pick the names for their kids based on a very different idea that people do in Western societies. They actually don't know, well, maybe now they do, but back then in 1980s, they had no real idea who Hitler is. They just heard the name, they thought it's a leader, it's a strong person, and yeah, and then you call your kid like that. So he said there were some kids who were called Mussolini. You can imagine, all the kids got their names after the political leaders, and yeah, in a way I found this was super hilarious. Quite an unexpected part of this book to me was about domestic violence. It comes towards the end of the book, and I was actually very surprised that Trevor talks about it in such an open way. It's obviously a very vulnerable topic to discuss, and his mother's husband was very violent towards him and eventually towards his mother. And he shot his mother, and the miracle happened, and the bullet went through her brain but somehow didn't damage it, and his mother is still alive and she's doing really well. But reading about those moments is obviously scary, but I also recommend it to anyone because I think it is important to see how a person, we often think about domestic violence in terms of monsters, but the reality is that these people don't have to be monsters. They can also seem like nice, decent people, and they can have their beautiful parts too. So not necessarily the person is horrible all the way, and that's the kind of example that Trevor's father was. Being in South Africa as a tourist obviously showed me the beauty of the country. It taught me a lot about its history. But here you have a first-hand experience of the person who was raised under apartheid regime, which is scary to imagine. And he talks about the transition. When he was born, apartheid was still happening, and his mother, yeah, basically she went against all the rules, all the norms, and she just said, "I will do what I want," even though it created a certain risk. And that's certainly a character to admire in a way. And then obviously there was a transition, how he grew up, how as a colored kid, what are the obstacles he went through. You would think that life suddenly gets better when apartheid regime falls, but he talks about the general confusion for certain people that was in the air. And I think that's a very, very special memoir. I really enjoyed reading this book. I'm not gonna lie, I did miss the part which talks about his success, how did he get where he is now. That still remains a bit of a mystery, but maybe part 2 is coming. Thank you very much for watching my vlog. I hope you enjoyed. Please comment, that really inspires me to do them in the future and hopefully to continue reading more, to discuss more, to share my thoughts and ideas. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe, like, your copycat.